Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Happy Guys. Regrettably this week we don't have an owl guy with us, but we do have a special guest filling in, so you will get to meet him later. He's a fun guy. I think you'll enjoy. This week we will be talking about...
Happy Maiden Oopsie. Alright, so I'll cut that bit out.
That and elections. We are in an election year, so it's topical for this moment at least. Seeing as how we don't have a guy, I will catch you up on the outro, so enjoy! Okay, so hello and welcome everybody to our 5th episode. I think this is our 5th episode. Yeah, 5th episode of Happy Guys. Today we unfortunately don't have a guy. So, well, we have two guys, but we don't have that guy. We have our special guest filling in for Guy, codename Swallow.
Yes, I'm Norman Gilliland, and I'm filling in tonight for Stephanie Elkins on this episode of Simply Folk. No copyright infringement intended.
Intention doesn't ever matter.
Oh,
trust me,
oh
it does not.
Oh boy, I'm sorry, NPR.
NPR's not going to do anything. They're nice. They're nice people.
It's true.
Don't do anything, NPR, please. Did I ever tell you about our... Do you ever listen to our podcast?
Yeah, I do every once in a while. Yeah. It's nice background noise
while you're trying to ignore something.
Yeah, exactly.
We did have an episode where we used copyrighted music and we didn't realize it. So copyright does matter sometimes.
Oh wow!
It's not as big a deal as what you normally think, surprisingly. But yeah, what happened was, I think we've talked about this on the show before, but what happened was the creator of the music monetized it, so if this channel ever gets popular, it won't, but if this channel ever gets popular, and we start making money on it, then that video will only give revenue to that artist. Or partially. I think that's how it works.
Oh, wow. YouTube is a strange and wonderful place.
Yeah, it's not as frightening as I thought it was going to be. But anyway, so our topic we are going to talk about today is elections. Elections in general. We are in a election year, so
that's also a leap year. But elections are, I think, a little bit more important for the American populace.
We're in a leap year?
Yeah. Election years and leap years.
So are leap years every 4 years?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
I never knew that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have. How does that work? Do we have a one less day in?
We have one extra day in February. There's February 29th, so everybody can campaign for one more day.
Everybody has one more day. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we gain a day in January.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that already happened because it's February, right?
Yeah, it's February.
So
we get a February 29th.
Oh, February. Okay, so we get a February 29th.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. That's cool. So yeah, we're also in an election year, so we have certain candidates that are up and running. Right now, it's only as we speak. In the future, you guys will know so much more than we will. But at the moment, it's only the primaries running around. So if I may pry into the life of Swallow, do you have a nominee that you've picked to throw your weight behind?
Well, you have traded one pretentious liberal for another pretentious liberal.
That I have.
And so I'm keeping track of the Democratic side very carefully. I'm somewhere in the middle between the two candidates right now.
Really?
Yeah.
I would have. See, you and I have been friends for a little while, so I would have thought you would have gone fully behind Bernie Sanders.
Well, yes, you are making gestures towards my copy of the Communist Manifesto right now. That doesn't necessarily mean I agree with everything he has to say. And I do think he has some real drawbacks, that Hillary Clinton has some real strengths where he has some real weaknesses.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
Sure. So Hillary Clinton, of course, is a former Secretary of State, whereas Bernie Sanders is, an independent from Vermont. And that's about it. So he doesn't have quite the nuanced view or the experience or the rapport with foreign leaders that Hillary Hillary Clinton does right now. And I think in today's age, especially with things like Russia and ISIS and, North Korea, as always, she definitely shines there, where he is, more of a domestic affairs kind of guy.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm actually in a politics class right now that keeps track. If you're ever in college and you decide to take politics classes, I think you'll realize quickly that it does not matter what the topic of the class is. If it's an election year, then first 20 minutes of class is always going to be about, all right, so this happened last week. Let's talk about that for a little while. So the class that I'm in actually is called U.S. National Security Policy, and the professor usually spends a solid 5 or 10 minutes on the first part of class just discussing the candidates and things that they've been doing, and that's actually something that that we've pointed out before, is that he is Hillary Clinton does have that international catch a bit. She does have kind of that rise over him, but I think there are definitely strong points to the Sanders ideology. A lot of what people have said actually is that he's rather neo-isolationist.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. And to a point, I agree with it. I think Sanders' foreign policy is really, really focused on coalition building. And if you've watched the past two Democratic debates, you'll hear him talk about how we need to build a coalition to combat ISIS, and how it needs to be Muslim troops on the ground to combat ISIS, because we can't step in and do that. And so he definitely understands the need for America to be involved in foreign politics and foreign affairs. So I wouldn't go so far as to call him neo-isolationist, but he definitely wants to keep American troops out of conflicts and American troops back on home soil. And I'm not sure exactly how well that would actually function, because since World War II, we've had bases everywhere, and we've never really had a giant demilitarizing since then. So,
well, I think you're both right and wrong. We have had the military has shrunk in size, and it has demobilized in that sense, but the reason that it shrunk in size is because it became a professional military. So it's completely voluntary, and all the people in the military now are in it for the profession, and they aren't just they aren't draftees or anything. So we have had kind of this demilitarization, but I think what you're probably saying is that we haven't let go of the rest of the world. We haven't relinquished our influence on the rest of the world, which is very much a common theme in the history of politics and national security for the U.S.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying. And what I was getting at is more not so much numbers of men on the ground, or men and women trained in the military, so much as military spending in the military complex. And that really hasn't shrunk since the end of World War II.
Well, it hasn't shrunk since the Cold War. I think the Cold War. The Cold War is mainly what pumped the numbers so far up. But you're right. We haven't ever let go of that. So yeah, that is interesting. But so you think that if Bernie Sanders had a more solid opinion on foreign policy and national security policy, you would give him a little more consideration, or?
Well, his lack of, I suppose, skill in foreign policy is not so much a detractor for me, so much as it's an advantage for Hillary Clinton over him. He's really just untested, and I don't know how well his foreign policy would work. And I don't think the American people know how well his foreign policy would work. It sounds really strange to them, what he's suggesting. Whereas Hillary Clinton, it has been the face of our defense before, has been the face of our foreign affairs before, and she knows how to deal with that. And the American people know what would happen with her. I think more of why Bernie Sanders is gaining such a big push. And by the way, we are recording this on the day of the Nevada caucuses for the Democrats. And last I checked was 20 minutes ago, and Hillary was leading by less than a point. And so that would have been unimaginable, like last year. Like if you had come up to me and said, "Hey, this one senator from Vermont that not a whole lot of people have ever heard of is going to be going toe-to-toe with Hillary Clinton in an election," I would have laughed at you. But I think it really speaks to how helpless the American people feel before the hands of the banks and big businesses that he's doing so well and pulling so well.
Yeah, he definitely has the young, fresh out of college or in college vote, I would say, because a lot of what young, fresh out of college people are facing, it's not only them, but that's a lot of what of the people who are facing it. They're facing this giant financial burden, so I think he definitely does have that vote there, because he does sort of go up against the any other candidate in as far as economics goes. He is, interestingly enough, I guess I can't say this for sure, but I think he is the first seriously considered social democrat candidate in, I would say, at least 100 years, if not the entire history of the nation.
I think speaking to that, I know that none of them have ever identified as a democratic socialist like he does, but he draws a lot from FDR, which makes a lot of sense considering that America is still reeling from the Great Recession, and FDR was a Great Depression president, and he helped us out to get through there. I think also why the young vote goes so heavily towards Bernie Sanders is, legalized pot and free college.
I think we'll have to have a whole episode on. I might have to one of these days go toe to toe with either Swallow or Guy with the whole Sanders thing, because I can't stand when anybody says that Sanders is going to offer free college, because nothing is free. Nothing is ever free, and it makes me so angry.
He's never offered free college. He's offered tuition-free college, and you and I both know that there's a lot more to pay for here than just tuition. But I don't know if he would ever be able to get it done, even if he, kind of like Obama, rode on the backs of the millennials into office, and there was a giant, overwhelming majority of Democrats now in the Senate and the House. I don't think he would actually be able to get it done, because that's just such a giant undertaking.
That's true, and he's not even offering free tuition to nationally, as far as every college goes. He's offering it to public schools. So when people say free college, it's free, and I say that in quotes because, again, tuition still wouldn't be free. Everybody would be paying for it. But but it's only tuition, and it's only to public schools. So anybody going to a private university probably wouldn't have that much of an effect, at least in that very small instance, because if this thing actually happened, there would be widespread ripples throughout the entire education community. And whether or not those would be good or not, I think deserves quite a bit of attention. But yeah, that's definitely, I think, the highest part among his young voters is definitely the free college. So yeah, that's the Democratic side. So if I may ask, where are you registered to vote?
I believe I'm still registered to vote in my hometown, but I believe simply because of the climate here at our college that I'm going to change to this district because I think my vote will matter more because my hometown is an extraordinarily liberal place, so I'm not really worried about it. But here, I'm a little bit more worried about, and especially considering I want to live here for a while, possibly even a couple years after high school or after college.
After high school.
Whew. Oh yeah, man.
Not going back there.
That was an interesting slip there. But with a couple years after college, I definitely want this area to be more representative of what I think it should be like.
I've never actually thought about that before. I've always thought of voting in strictly terms of how convenient it is to me, because the only way I am we're currently going to college right now in Wisconsin, and my hometown is back in Missouri. So the only way I'd be able to vote in my hometown is either by absentee ballot, which isn't too difficult, or by going home for spring break. And I decided not to go home for spring break this year, so the decision, because I wasn't registered to vote until this year, so the decision of where to register to vote was strictly one of convenience for me. I never even considered how much my individual vote would count here or there.
So you're registered here?
No, I'm registered back home.
Oh,
so,
all right.
So I will be voting by absentee ballot. So, but yeah, that's actually an interesting point, because I doubt that many people at all think that way. Because it would be, well, I guess it wouldn't be terribly easy to switch where you're registered to vote, because you have to provide some sort of proof. But that'd probably be something that wouldn't be too terribly difficult to do if you wanted to give a certain area a bit more liberal or conservative representation.
Yeah, you have to register to vote. As far as I know, in Wisconsin, you have to register to vote every election cycle.
Really?
Yeah. At least, re-register. I think it might be a little bit... I know that what you need is 2 forms of identification, one of which has to have your date of birth on it, and then a certificate of residence, proof of residence. And because we're college students, our residence can be listed both as our homes or our college mailing address, where we reside for the school year. And so that's why, because we college kids are a lot more overwhelmingly liberal in this day and age, that's why college towns often vote liberally, is because college kids reside there.
I find it really surprising that you have to register every election cycle, because the way that I understood it, as far as Missouri voting goes, I sent in a voter registration form with my utility bill, not utility bill, bank statement from my bank at home, and that's it. That's all I have to do for, I think, for as long as I live in Missouri.
Really?
Really. I might have to, every time I vote, I think I might have to provide some sort of form of identification. But as far as they were concerned, and as far as the reading serves to my memory, I think I'm finished for registering until I move.
That's radically different. Oh, speaking of the voting climate here in Wisconsin. There's been a bill up recently, and from what I've heard of, and this is in the state legislature, it was passed by the state Senate, so I believe now it's in the state House of Representatives here in Wisconsin. But the wording of it essentially says that towns are no longer allowed to make citizens deputy registrars, or I'm blanking completely and totally on the language.
Election officials, essentially.
Yeah, to deputize
Volunteer.
election officials, volunteers. Essentially, the town cannot do that anymore, and you must have a valid DMV license, and you, I think, would have to register online here in Wisconsin. And that just passed in the Senate, which is kind of crazy to me, because that means not only do you have to have a DMV license, but also a internet connection, and you can't really do it face-to-face anymore.
So is there a practical reason that they are trying to employ this? Is there a reason that they gave that they said, this is a problem, so this is what this will be fixing?
Oh, well, the Uber liberals on campus, and most likely Owl, would say it's because they're trying to repress the minority and the student voters.
Right.
But I think it might just be like an oversight or a loophole that happens in the wording when it's trying to just make it easier and less dangerous to have like people just kind of signing up, because you can, if you do it online, you can only have one per DMV license, so it's kind of just like an anti-election fraud bill.
So they're trying to, I guess the people who wrote this bill would say that their reasoning is that they're trying to put another fail-safe in the system to prevent election fraud.
Yes, and the counter-argument to that is the wording of the bill is extraordinarily discriminatory to the economically oppressed, that is, poor people, sorry. So, essentially, the black vote and the Latino vote here in Wisconsin, who are a lot of poor people.
So, you would have to have a DMV license, which, I don't know, I don't see that working out well in big cities, because in big cities it's pretty commonplace to just walk around or take public transportation, so I think that's kind of unless you exclude the large metropolitan areas, I think that's kind of a big oversight. And the internet connection, honestly, I think the internet's fairly accessible to, I would say, 90 to 95% of the population these days, because even if you don't have a actual internet connection that's good enough to get you just to work out a few documents, you can always go to a library.
Yeah,
so
that's the thing. I think what's more disconcerting about it, and even if it was just like the DMV issued IDs and not licenses, what's more difficult about it is if you do live, let's take Milwaukee for instance, because that's a good example of a metropolitan area with large working poor population. If you're working full time, it's going to take a really, really long time, or it's not going to take a really long time, but it's going to be difficult to get out of work for long enough to go down to the DMV, because the DMV, we all know, has terrible hours and terrible service, and it's the worst experience. But it's going to be difficult to get out of work.
We're sorry if any one of our 3 subscribers is a DMV employee. I'm sure you're wonderful. We all are.
You're wonderful. The entity that you work for.
Maybe the devil. We're not entirely sure, but it might be.
Yeah. But that's what's going through the legislature right now. And is definitely something that is going to affect this election year in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I guess I don't entirely understand the reasoning behind it, because there had to have been some sort of problem that caused it in the first place, or I guess I just don't entirely understand why it would be a thing, because it honestly just seems like it's impeding and putting another stop in another bureaucratic hurdle in the way of things, whenever in reality voting should be made to be the most painless and smooth, maybe not effortless, because the more effort you have to do something, the more someone is going to believe in something. Yeah. So I can understand not making it the most easy thing to do. You have the app and you just press a button, but just putting another bureaucratic stop in there, just I don't get it. I just don't really get it all that much.
Yeah, I'm pretty opposed to this as well. It'll just hurt the Wisconsin voters, and those are some. You were saying 90 to 95% of people have internet access, and I agree with that. You can go to the library, and the libraries are set up here to be pretty accessible and pretty public. But still, it just bugs me.
Yeah, I guess I just don't understand it. Maybe if I sat down and actually talked with one of the lawmakers, which will never happen, about what the reasoning was, then they would explain this to me. But I'm just not going to get it. So, so yeah, you are registered to vote here, and so where do you? If I had to tell you, because the Wisconsin vote is April.
Yes, I believe.
Yeah. So if I had to tell you the vote was right now, and I was the one, and I was the one election official, I went to the DMV and got a license and everything. Who do you think you would vote for? Would it be more Hillary or would it be more Sanders? If I can put you on that spot there.
Oh, you can put me on that spot all you want. Unlike Owl, I will do my best to be very open about this and not talk for 5 minutes around the question.
Wow. Shots fired. Shots fired.
He's not here. He'll hear that later.
And he'll love it.
Yes, he will.
He will, by the way, he'll agree wholeheartedly. He will understand himself.
Yeah. I believe I would go probably Bernie, simply because he touches on a lot more things that would affect me right now than Hillary. And that's not to say that I am opposed to Hillary at all. She, like I said earlier in this episode, she's very good. Her foreign policy is on point. But Bernie Sanders is just, I think, well, Bernie Sanders is it's my first time in a presidential election, and I want it to be special. I want it to think it matters before the jadedness of American politics gets to me, and I'm just vote for the person who's going to get the primary election.
That's one thing. Actually, two things there. There's a guy I know in my NS class who is, I think, very much on the conservative side of things, and he has commented before about how Hillary Clinton's foreign policy is indeed on point. So even from and I think this guy's had quite a bit of real life experience. I do believe he was in the military for quite some time before college. So him saying, yeah, her foreign policy is pretty much on point, I think that means quite a bit. So even from both sides of the aisle, I think people kind of trust her as far as foreign policy goes. It's very much the domestic side that she just gets obliterated by anybody on the right side of that spectrum. So the same person in my class was talking about how Rand Paul, he has dropped out of the Republican nomination, and this guy has said that he thinks that Rand Paul is the best guy for the job. And when our professor asked him, so Rand Paul dropped out, so who do you think you're going to put your weight behind? He responded with, well, I'm still going to write him in. He said, I hate how people in this country strategically vote. He says that he hates how it isn't the way it should be. It's just you think whoever is the best for the job, you should vote for him. So I can get that with the jadedness of the presidential election, because as soon as your person is only getting 5% of the vote, all support is just lost. Just all support is lost, which is pretty irritating.
Exactly. And before he dropped out, Martin O'Malley was a really, really strong voice on the Democratic debates, no matter how little time he got. But he dropped out in the middle of the Iowa caucuses because he wanted to give the rest of his voters time to choose between Bernie and Hillary. And I just kind of find that, I take issue with that, and I agree with a random person from Happy's class here. It seems to me that American elections and American politics isn't so much a voting for who you really want to be president anymore, but more voting against who you don't want to be president, which it hurts my soul. I know in my family, it's oh man, I'm going to vote for so-and-so because I don't want Trump to be president, or I'm going to vote for so-and-so because I don't like so-and-so's policies here. And that just seems really wrong to me, because it stops being a meritocracy at that point, and the election just becomes contentious and violent.
Yeah, and that is frustrating, because you think of democracy and you think of this whole idea of vote for whoever you think is the best, and the theory is that a whole bunch of rational people are going to rationally pick the best guy for the job, which, in all honesty, I don't entirely agree with, but that can be a conversation for another time. But it is deeply frustrating to have this bitterness and this spitefulness in politics, where it isn't, I like this person, it's that, dear God, I'm terrified of Donald Trump. And so, and honestly, I think that a ton of it too has devolved from, this is the best specific person for this specific job, and it's just devolved to, I like this party because that's what Fox News says, or I like this party because this is what they say on CNBC all the time, or CNN. Which one's the liberal one? CNN, okay, yeah.
But I think you're trying to talk about MSNBC, which is the even more liberal one.
So yeah, MSNBC, see, that's how much I pay attention to mainstream news. It's the role of mainstream news is literally just to polarize you to whichever side you're even slightly leaning. And if you're going to watch mainstream news, watch both sides. Don't just go for Fox or MSNBC. Definitely take both sides, because then you're going to be better informed and you're going to see both sides of things, and you're not just going to be joining with a whole bunch of people who think like you, and you're all going to rally around and say, yeah, those guys are just terrible.
Or, better yet, watch C-SPAN and form your own opinions, like I do, because I'm boring.
I'm really glad that you brought up the boring part, because I don't think anybody can watch C-SPAN for longer than 5 minutes except for you and my brother, who, yes, enjoys watching C-SPAN, because it is so terribly boring.
It's awful. I would rather watch a marathon of Antiques Roadshow with my grandma.
Oh, that'd be kind of interesting, actually.
Antiques Roadshow?
Yeah.
Antiques Roadshow is so dry.
They have, paintings and stuff?
Wow, I am coming down really hard on public broadcasting. And at NPR and, PBS, I apologize. I love you.
And NPR and PBS, those are interesting.
Yeah.
Those are interesting.
But Antiques Roadshow, just please stop. Just please stop. Anyways.
I mean, I'll check your point. Let's not talk about Antiques Roadshow, which I think is actually interesting.
My point with C-SPAN is that it's kind of the unfettered facts, and you can watch politicians speak directly on the floor, which is extraordinarily dry. Which brings us back to mainstream news, which is mainstream news kind of exists to make politics less dry. But the problem with that is, with 24-hour news networks, their goal is to make money and get ratings. So that means that they have to cater to their audience, and they have to spin their facts that way. So that's why you see Fox News often coming down hard on younger politicians and the wrongs of younger people, because their demographic is, man, get off my lawn. And MSNBC is really like, they have Rachel Maddow, and Rachel Maddow is a really good example of what it is. She's a very highly educated, non-straight woman. She's like the epitome of what that side, the progressive side, really like stands for.
Is non-straight a term?
It is now. It is now.
Okay.
For those of you who don't know, Rachel Maddow is a lesbian.
Thank you, because I had no idea what non-straight meant.
I could not think of the word lesbian for a while.
I actually don't, my apologies to Miss Maddow, but I actually don't know who Rachel Maddow is. I might have seen her, but I don't remember who she is. Ooh. Codename Swallow has a technological device in his hand, and he's looking up a picture of Rachel Maddow, the non-straight woman, to educate me. Let's see. Let's see if I actually recognize her. Never seen her before in my life.
All right. Yes, this is the first image in Google Images for Rachel Maddow, at least on my thing. Is a cutout of Rachel Maddow without any white space, so that you can easily Photoshop it anywhere.
I actually didn't think about that much. So anyway, yeah. If you are a registered voter, I please do urge you to, if you can stomach it, and if you have like a fork that you can stab yourself with every 5 minutes to keep yourself awake, watch C-SPAN and form an opinion of what you think. And also, what I think is actually a really big positive thing for elections nowadays is the just the internet, because every politician now, and actually this is extremely interesting because everything that the politicians are doing nowadays who are running for president is modeled after, and I guess this is a bit of speculation and not entirely what I'll call professional.
Objective.
Well, no, it's not entirely like professional. I'm not professional yet in this area, but I have read before a bit on this, and what a lot of politicians are doing now with their campaigns, they're modeling them after another presidential candidate a while back. And what they're doing is they all have their websites now. They all have easily available donation things, buttons, I guess you can call them, on their websites, where it's $5, $20, $50, $100 more. I think that's generally what I've seen.
Yeah, if you go to Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or Trump or Cruz's websites, you literally, like, it just the first thing you have to go to in a bunch of these is a page that's just like, donate now for the cause. Also, speaking of websites, did you hear that Donald Trump bought out JebBush.com?
I did actually, and I heard that, and I went to JebBush.com, and you click on it, and there's a giant Trump face staring at you, telling you to make America great again, and it's hilarious.
And it's beautiful.
I actually like Jeb Bush much more than Donald Trump, and I think it's actually quite hilarious.
From a very liberal perspective, I've always liked Jeb Bush's campaign simply because, well, first off, his campaign was actually really good, and I think would have won in any year. Not this election year where things have been insane, but his entire, like, the rhetoric of his campaign and his election, and his campaign, was that he's trying to distance himself from the Bush name, which was really good. But this culminated in his motto being Jeb! Exclamation point, which I thought was amazing, mainly because it sounded like the next new hit on Broadway.
Jeb! Next new hit on Broadway, Jeb.
Yeah. I thought it was going to be excellent.
It's all in Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Head.
Hib, see? My apologies to the Hispanic community. But a lot of their websites are donations, but actually, I did a research paper last semester that involved me going to several different websites of the conservative side of the elections right now, and their websites are, for the most part, there were a few candidates who really fell short, and it hurt them, I guarantee you. For the most part, they put them together very well, very nicely. They have bulleted points of what their stances are on things. They have really aesthetically pleasing sites, which is actually a huge step for the voter, because now, like we said, like 90-95% of America has a good internet connection. Now voters can, if you're wanting to vote for something, don't listen to the mainstream media first. I guess you can, but first and foremost, go to the websites and see what they stand for and see what they say. And just see what they say. But what's interesting is that, would you like to take a guess as to what politician did this whole thing first with the website and these donations of $5, $10, $20, $50?
Is it that darn Kenyan Muslim?
That it is. Our current president, Barack Obama. From my understanding, he kind of pioneered this social media in the way that it should be for politicians. And he definitely pioneered the whole give what you want, because I have read before that while Obama was trying to, he had these options of give however much you can. So if you can only give $5, well, America has 400 million people in it. So 500,000 people donate $5. That's $2.5 million right there. So
that's also how Bernie Sanders is running his campaign, and it's actually functioning extraordinarily well. And it gets people invested. Also, did you know that there's like an entire, in our communications department here, a lot of the lessons and a lot of work, they actually use Obama's campaign and sound bites from Obama's speeches while he was on the campaign trail to iterate their points. And there was a book written by, I believe, Alexander Wolf, which is called something to do with basketball. I am drawing a complete blank.
Is this The Audacity of Hoop?
The Audacity of Hoop, that's what it is. Yeah. But it's a recent book written by him that talks about like how Obama uses basketball and how he used basketball to throughout his life to connect to voters and to like relax himself. But there's like an entire like genre of books that analyze Obama's campaign and the rhetoric he used, and it's very true. Web designers in election years are, from now on, I'm calling it, going to be very good years for web designers.
That's true. That's very true.
So, thanks, Obama.
So here we can actually say, thanks, Obama, without any sarcasm. Because if he hadn't, honestly, if he hadn't pioneered this whole social media thing, I mean, somebody else probably would have sometime down the road, but he did it when he did, and now we have these websites where you can go and just see, all right, what do these candidates actually stand for, and what do they say, and I think what you really want to do if you go there is look for facts. Don't look for just someone saying, we're going to make America great again, not to pick on Trump, kind of to pick on Trump, but don't just find someone who's saying that they're going to make America great again. Find out how they're going to make America great again. Find out an actual plan, because as it stands right now, as far as national security goes, the only person who has a plan is Jeb Bush. And I think Sanders we touched on earlier. Sanders is the only one who is kind of isolationist, and then there's Jeb Bush who has an actual plan. I'm going to be honest, I haven't read it yet, so I don't know entirely what it entails, but he's the only one brave enough to come out and say, this is my plan, and this is what actually, I think. I'm not just going to use rhetoric and try and get emotional votes.
Well, let's talk about Trump's plan, shall we?
Does he have a plan? Let's start there.
Here's where we get into the trickiness of Trump. And of course, since we're talking about politics, we are legally obligated to talk about Trump for a little while. But Trump's campaign, kind of the quintessential thing that he's said so far is, let's build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. And that's very concerning, especially in today's, what's the word I'm thinking of? In today's climate, he's just kind of grossly oversimplifying all, like, the issues in the Middle East, in Russia. Like, with Russia, he's essentially hand-waved the issue away by saying, oh, me and Putin will get along great. We'll have a good long talk, and that'll fix everything with Russia. And so that's a giant issue with his campaign. Where at least, we know Sanders' ideas and ideology behind his foreign policy, which is that he doesn't want American troops on the ground. He wants people in that area to take care of it himself. Trump, on the other hand, he hasn't really had a steady comment. He hasn't had a steady commentary on what he would do. We just know that he would talk about it and he would deal with it, which is problematic. But it's getting him polling numbers, at least.
Honestly, whenever this whole Trump thing started and before any votes were cast, I thought that the phenomenon that was happening was the Rand Paul phenomenon, in which there were a very few number of people who had a very loud voice, and which is easy to do with social media these days.
And, I'm nodding my head vigorously.
I honestly thought that the whole Trump thing was just a very small number of people who had a very loud voice, and the media likes to take things and run with them. But the second that those polling numbers came out of Iowa and out of New Hampshire, he had to have been taken more seriously, at least by me, because I'm guessing all of the Trump supporters don't run in my social circle, because I don't have any friends who are Trump supporters, and I don't think that any of their friends are Trump supporters, so there aren't even friends of friends that I know that would be Trump supporters, so my mind was very, very boggled and astounded by the vast number of Trump supporters, which honestly I think is kind of concerning, because, like you said, he doesn't really have a steady point anywhere. He's not a steady politician. He's very much all over the place, and he doesn't really have a plan other than, we're going to build a wall and we're going to deport all the Mexicans that are currently living here, and we're just going to, honestly, I can't think. It's going to be huge. There are going to be billions and billions of jobs. That's all I've ever heard of him. So, and that and him just essentially being a jerk to every politician ever. And one reason why I do kind of like Jeb Bush is that Jeb Bush has been the main sparring partner of Trump this entire election. Go to any debate and you'll see the one person taking on Trump most of the time is probably Jeb Bush, because bias is not put aside here. He's the most rational one on the Republican ticket.
That's also very true. We know that Jeb Bush is rational, in quotes, for a politician, because none of them are, we know. But he's always been kind of like the intellectual of the Bush family. He's never really been like the charismatic one, the one like the face of the family, but he has been the very intellectual one of the family. And so a lot of his rhetoric is a little bit more cerebral, and he can stand toe to toe with Trump, which honestly has hurt his polling numbers a lot. But like the substance that's come out of that has been a lot better. He's pushing Trump to say crazy things, and he's pushing Trump to double down on the incredibly offensive things. And there have been a couple gaffes in Jeb Bush's campaign. Like right at the beginning, right after he announced it, he accidentally said that he liked a book that had white supremacist ties to it, which was very early and it was very minor, but it still has kind of held him back. But what has held him back more has been, I think, just his contentiousness with Trump. And Trump, of course, is a very just contentious person who has contentious with everyone, including now the Pope.
Has he? I haven't even seen this. Has he been engaging with the Pope now?
So a while back, the Pope was asked his opinions on Trump, and the media kind of blew the Pope's comments out of proportion. But the Pope essentially implied anybody that's that insistent on building a wall and keeping people out is not open-hearted and not the form of Christian that I like. And Trump, of course, responded by calling the Pope's comments disgraceful. Because it's what Trump does.
One of the main things that Donald Trump does really bad is his complete and total lack of respect, which I can kind of understand in the political realm, because I guarantee you most, if not all, of the politicians that we're going to be voting for in this 2016 election are rat scumbags. I mean, that's just what politicians are. So
we love you. You run our country.
Let's not go that far. But I mean, that's just kind of how the political system is set up, especially in this day and age. So I can kind of understand why he would want to be a jerk to some of them, but Frank Underwood only works in a TV show, and you have to work with you have to work with people when you're in politics, because the whole system is set up to limit your power. So if you're going to limit yourself even more by polarizing yourself from every single other person in Washington, you're never going to get the wall built. So if you honestly want the wall built, you have to play nice with the others, which is what he doesn't do. But it's what people like to see on TV, because that's what our whole society is like, because we enjoy things that are entertaining, not things that we should actually be thinking about. So now he's actually getting votes now.
Part of that as well, just to play off of Happy's rant, while he takes a moment to collect himself and to become a happy hamster again, he's going to go run his wheel for a little while. But part of that is that Trump is, I think, combating a lot of the PC culture that's been coming about in his campaign and with his rhetoric. He's trying to cut through the PC culture. And to an extent, yeah, PC culture is crazy. It detracts from some points. But the way in which he's doing it, just by being radically offensive, and he implied that all Mexicans were rapists and thugs and criminals early in his campaign. And he openly has said that he's going to build a wall and he's going to make Mexico pay for it, which, by the way, Happy made a good point. He's never going to get the wall built if he's going to make Mexico pay for it and call them, on the other hand, a pack of scumbags. But that is really what Trump is playing off of, kind of just this ignorance and hatred for PC culture amongst ultra-right-wing conservatives, which I think I can be safe in assuming that his main base is.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like how people still think like third-wave feminism is a bunch of man-hating, bra-burning people, and they don't really understand the evolution of feminism from first-wave suffragettes to second-wave flower power to third-wave. Well, you do what you want.
Yeah, we actually It's so funny. We actually talked about first, second, and third wave feminism in our U.S. national security class. So everything just comes right back to that. But there was one, I want to say third wave feminist who made the point of, in U.S. national security policy, there is a NS theory. There are 4 or 5, actually no, there are about 7 or 8 main ones, and one of them is feminism, and I think most of that came about during the 80s, kind of as a response to Ronald Reagan, and I can see the media portrayal of, and I think the basic societal portrayal, especially on the right wing of things, of this third wave feminism goes back to the second wave feminism, and the third wave feminism is the good feminism, I think we'll say, and the second wave feminism is kind of crazy.
Yeah, that we'll put it that way. Third wave feminism is a reaction because second wave was kind of white centric, kind of essentialist in that it was like all women want this and all men want this, but third wave feminism is more of like, well, you're an individual, you have your own opinions and thoughts on being a woman, and I'm also an individual, and I have my own opinions and thoughts on being a woman, but we're both women, so I suppose we'll be happy. And that guy's a man, and he has his own thoughts and opinions on being a man, and what we are supposed to be as women, so we'll let him in and talk on it too. But there's, like, that's a very nuanced, like, entire school of thought, and the American public, very, very against nuance. It likes things in black and white. It likes a simple story.
Yeah, true.
And so you're able to play off against that. And we went on a little bit of a digression there, but I think that's the main point to draw from that, is that Trump's campaign, for all intents and purposes, I think is succeeding because it tries to cut through all the nuance that PC culture brings to society.
Yeah, I hadn't given it too much thought, but that kind of, honestly, I think articulates what a lot of people are thinking nowadays, is that Trump is really just cutting through this PC culture and really just being the radical opposite of the what I like to call the lefty loosey PC culture. So yeah, he's definitely the radical opposition to that. So that is probably where most of his support is coming from, which is really just frustrating because as a despiser of the PC culture, I know the difference between
speaking your thoughts and being offensive.
Yeah, being offensive and just wanting to be realistic as opposed to too soft or I can't think of the right word, but
essentially just knowing Happy, he doesn't really like to soften the punches that he thinks needs to be thrown. And PC culture kind of tries to put a glove on the things that do, which is a disagreement that he and I often have, but for all intents and purposes, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's life. We'll live with that. I'm fine.
Yes.
But yeah, I just think that there really sincerely needs to be a reconsideration by his supporters whether or not they sincerely think that that's what America is going to need, is this guy who is wildly offensive and never going to get anything done because he's pissed off everybody in every community in Washington. So I just think people need to reconsider that and actually think about his policies and ideals. But that's just kind of how it's going to run.
All right. So to keep things moving.
Do we have an update on the Nevada caucus?
We do not have an update on the Nevada caucus yet, but let me do that for us.
I'm sorry, I thought that's what you were going to do.
Oh, no. What I was going to say is, in the interest of our wild speculation, let's talk about ifs and buts. And on the the Nevada caucus, the Iowa caucus happened. The Nevada caucus is Clinton won by 5 points, so about the same lead she had over Obama in Nevada. 52% to 48%. It looks like.
Man, that's tight.
But let's put it all out on the playing field now. The Democrats that are still currently running are, of course, Senator Bernie Sanders and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And what is left of the insane Republican field is Jeb Bush, Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, John Kasich, Marco Rubio, and our personal favorite, Donald Trump. So let's have speculation. In a head-to-head matchup, who would win in a Hillary-Trump? How would that go?
In a Hillary-Trump? Oh, that's tough. Because that would... Man, I know who I would want to win, which is painful, because...
would you vote Democrat?
I would vote, if this came down to Hillary-Trump, I would vote Hillary, which is painful, but this is probably the only circumstance that I would ever do that unless this was if it was any further crazier than Trump, I would obviously still be voting Hillary, but this is probably the most mild crazy that I would vote against with Hillary. But as far as the nation goes, I would say probably Hillary as well, because
I would say so too. One of Hillary's main, I think, we hear when we're talking about the Democratic side quite a bit. We hear the electability argument from how Bernie Sanders would lose in a general election, and that comes down to, although Hillary has been trying to paint it differently lately, the fact that she's much more centrist than progressive. I believe 2 debates ago she kept on hammering on progressives are those who make progress. And no, that's not it. But she's definitely a moderate. She definitely has a long record of getting things done. And she's not as contentious as Trump. And I think there's a lot more people in America that lean towards the center and lean moderate that would come out of the woodwork and elect Hillary in that kind of debate. But if we went to both opposite sides and we put Bernie Sanders against Trump, that would be a wildly entertaining debate, because we'd just have 2 angry New Englanders yelling at each other on a stage. But how do you think that would turn out?
There's definitely a electability argument to be made, because when you put Sanders in context with everybody else is essentially more moderate than he is, because Guy and I are actually thinking of doing a podcast series explaining the political ideology spectrum. But just in brief, there is a political ideology spectrum, and at the center of it, the very center, is libertarianism. On the right side of this is, just a step to the right is republicanism. A step to the left is democracy, and then one step further than democracy is social democracy. So Bernie Sanders is definitely a social democrat, and so there's that electability issue, because I don't think that people want a socialist president. I think that looks really bad, but at the same time, there's so much
angst.
Angst, and I want to say audacity, although that gives him a bit too much credit to the Trump side, that it would just be such a crazy election. I honestly don't think that there would be any way to predict that, although I would probably say that Trump would win in that situation, because the nation as a whole, I want to say, is more conservative than liberal. It's starting to become more and more liberal, but I think just the fact that he's so far out of the democratic central way, and he's taken that step into social democracy, that Trump would get that edge on him.
Okay, I can see that. I personally fall on the other side because I think that the softness of tone in Bernie Sanders' underlying rhetoric, perhaps not in his actual rhetoric, because he yells a lot and he definitely speaks with a passion, but the softer side of we're going to be inclusionary towards minorities. And even I think he would win with Christian voters because he's very outspoken on refugees. I think that he would win against Trump's very confrontational rhetoric. And so Bernie Sanders, definitely, his stump speech is always, we're going to break up the big banks and yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. And that's very confrontational, but it's only towards an extraordinarily small subset of society, whereas Trump's rhetoric is very confrontational towards some pretty large subsets of society. So, like, the Latino vote, he's extraordinarily against immigration reform, and he wants to deport everyone. And against the Muslims, he at one point wanted everyone who was Muslim to wear an identifying mark. And the black vote, I don't think he would win that. So I fall on the other side, but that's an electability argument against Trump. The biggest thing for me on the electability for Bernie Sanders is the foreign policy, because Bernie Sanders is a Jewish man. But I honestly believe that if he got up on stage and someone asked him about Israel, he would come out against Israel. And Trump would be on the other side. No, we need to support Israel against everyone else. And that would go definitely heavily in favor of Trump or any other Republican.
Honestly, I don't know of many people who, and maybe it's just because it's not a hot topic, not a sponsor. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's because it's not such a hot topic right now. But I don't think I've ever met anybody who doesn't support Israel. I think most people are in the nation are fairly much in support of Israel. So I definitely can see that, where Sanders going against Israel, if he actually did it, if it became an issue and Sanders went against Israel and Trump went for it, that it would definitely sway the side to Trump, especially with our media that we have nowadays. It would vastly sway the things towards Trump. So, but I definitely see your argument though with Sanders, with the minority votes. That's honestly something very much to consider, because with that soft rhetoric and that inclusionary rhetoric, I think that would win people over a bit more than the confrontation would. But I just don't know.
Yeah. Stepping down the crazy scale, since you think Trump would already win, going down to second place in Republican polling right now, Ted Cruz, also a strong evangelical, very right-wing conservative presidential candidate. I'm presuming you're going to stick with the Republican side would win if they nominated Ted Cruz against a crazy Bernie Sanders nomination.
Definitely, especially if Cruz was going up against Sanders, this would definitely be a Republican victory. Cruz is very much the standard status quo Republican. He's definitely the standard status quo conservative. He's probably about... He's essentially the embodiment there. So I think he would get every conservative vote in the nation. So that's just half right there. And I think there are people who would side with him from the Democratic side because they wouldn't want to make that socialist jump. And I think, well, actually, I don't know who has more experience, because I know Cruz has been the governor of Texas for a while.
Sanders has been in politics since the 60s, so he's pretty much been in politics as long as Cruz has been alive.
So how long has Sanders... He's a senator now for Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
How long has he been a senator? Do we know?
I believe this is only his second term as a senator. Allow me, but he before that was he made a couple of gubernatorial bids for Vermont, and he has been mayor for a long time and representative before that.
Okay.
And he's been a very strong voice in politics for a very long time, although he has long run as an independent, which Hillary Clinton has pointed out a couple times. Keeping things moving along, though, what do you think about a Hillary Cruz election?
A Hillary Cruz election. First of all, I honestly don't think that would ever happen because that's not exciting enough for America. Because that's very much standard conservative versus standard liberal. That's a harder sell. That's I think that Cruz might win because the Clinton name still has a bad taste in quite a few people's mouths, and it would help her with a certain crowd, but I think it would hurt her with enough people that they would want somebody else to win. So, and honestly, I think you mentioned earlier that Bush is trying to separate himself from the family name. I don't think he's entirely trying to do that because I don't think he's trying to make it a point, which is probably a good way to go because honestly, it would probably hurt him more than help him nowadays.
That's a really interesting point you made there. Going on back onto the concept of Jeb Bush, because he's losing so badly, I think he's kind of stopped trying to distance himself as well. Even to the point of in the last election or last debate, he was very vocal about defending his family and defending his brother, definitely. But that's also a very good point to make about Hillary. The argument that I've heard is that this is not a monarchy, this is a democracy, which is why people have discounted both Hillary and Jeb Bush.
Right, yeah.
But honestly, I'm not sure because time has passed since Clinton's time in office. Time has also passed since Bush's time in office. And Bush definitely blamed Clinton for a lot of the problems that he faced. But people are now kind of getting back to Bill Clinton and be like, man, that was a really good presidency. We ended with a surplus. We got things done. Like, him and Gingrich actually talked with each other and were friendly and could get things done. So I don't think there's quite as much resentment for Clinton, for Bill Clinton anymore. But also with that, Bill Clinton isn't actually that much out on the campaign trail. He's been very quiet and away from Hillary's campaign. So I found that very interesting. Is that something that you anecdotally have seen? That people still remember Bill Clinton's presidency kind of poorly?
It's split down the middle. I'm going to say alongside the end of Bush's presidency. We ended up with a surplus, and a lot of people remember that as good. There was also the rather comical Monica Lewinsky scandal, which definitely hurt him and put people against him.
That's very true.
And so I think there are people who don't like him because of that, and there are people who like him because, yes, we did end in a surplus, and they see that presidency is good. Just like there is a split down the middle of people with Bush's presidency, because we went to war and
we're still at war.
Technically, yes, and a lot of conservatives honestly thought that it was a good idea. I know a lot of liberals were on the other side.
A lot of liberals were on the side of warfare right at the beginning, like right after 9/11. But after about 2 years, they were like, man, I don't like this anymore.
Right, and there are a whole host of reasons, but I think that those two wars left such a more horrendously terrible taste in America's mouth than the, like I said, comical Monica Lewinsky scandal, that the Clinton name isn't as toxic as the Bush name. So, which is actually, I honestly think, kind of a shame, because Bush, so far, I'm pretty sure, is the moderate of the Republican side, and he's the most level-headed out of all of them. Everybody else is trying to, either they don't have experience, Ben Carson, or they or they are just too far out there. I think, especially when you see in the debates, which one thing the debates are actually useful for, you can see how they handle themselves. Bush has always handled himself rather well, and he can take on questions, and he is knowledgeable on a stage with millions of people watching, which is incredibly difficult to do. So,
it's actually interesting that you mentioned that George Bush is more middle of the road conservative.
Jeb Bush.
Jeb Bush is more middle of the road conservative.
Not George Bush.
And that's, I think, very interesting because he's still a staunch conservative, and he's definitely not moderate or centrist like previous ones we've seen, like his father, or his father was a little bit more centrist than he is. But I think that really goes to speak to the impact that the Tea Party movement has had on the entirety of the conservative side and the Republican voter base. But drawing this back to what we're talking about, let's talk about a Bush nomination. Bush-Clinton.
Bush-Clinton?
Yeah.
It would be Clinton, no challenge.
Clinton, no challenge?
Because like I said, the Bush name is so toxic. What would happen is that so far right now, since it's just a primary nomination, the people are talking to Bush and talking to Jeb Bush, and they're talking to him about his ideas, and they're challenging him on what he says. If this became a national race, the era of George Bush and the two wars that we got involved with, and September 11th and everything that happened after that, those would come up again and again and again, and they would kill, and Katrina, and that would kill his election. That would absolutely, because the name is so toxic that he's not going to be able to surmount against it.
Which I think is a damn shame, because Clinton-Bush debate, I think that comes up in a lot of poli-sci majors fan fictions, actually. But I think just with how cerebral both of those candidates are, the debates from that would be on point.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it would be really interesting also to see what a Sanders-Bush campaign would look like, because at that point you have probably, although Sanders does tend to run not as negative of a campaign, I still think that things that would come out would be rather negative towards the Bush name, and so you would almost have the Bush name running versus, the Red Scare.
Definitely. And I saw a political cartoon once that was two Christmas boxes that were unwrapped, and in one was a cartoonization of Hillary Clinton that was really happy and outstretching her arms up, and the other one was Jeb Bush with his face all happy and his arms stretched out, and they're both really happy popping out of these Christmas gifts, and the caption said, "Worst regifting ever." Which I think is funny because, the names are hard to get away from, and so, honestly, if Bush ran against anybody, the George Bush era would come up so often that I honestly think it would be hard for him to get elected unless he distanced himself from it and made a point to say, "I am not my brother, these are my points," and if the media let him, honestly.
And I think even then, like you say, the media and just kind of general American public knowledge wouldn't let himself distance the name quite as much as he would hope. That would also mean that we would have 3 consecutive Bushes running with a Democratic president in between.
It's true. It's kind of interesting.
Because it would be Bush, Democrat, Bush, Democrat, Bush.
So it's kind of like a song. Bush, Democrat, Bush, Democrat, Bush.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if I may, I know we've talked about this a little bit before we decided to do our podcast swallow. Can we talk a bit about, you mentioned superdelegates.
Oh, superdelegates.
And I'm going to let you ramble on a bit because I've heard of superdelegates before, but I don't know what they are. So elaborate for me because I am totally uneducated.
Right. So superdelegates, essentially each state has a set amount of delegates for the primary based on their population. So, like, Nevada has 35 for the Democratic side, and these are based on registered voters for each party. So the Nevada caucus has 35 delegates on the Democratic side and 30 delegates on the Republican side. Now, a set number of those have to vote the way that the public votes. So, like, if it's a 60-40 split for Happy versus me, 60% of the delegates would have to vote for Happy in the national primary election,
right?
And 40% of them would have to vote for me. At least on the Republican side, the Democratic National Convention has this extraordinarily interesting concept called a superdelegate. And a superdelegate is essentially someone who has free reign to vote whichever way they think of for whichever primary candidate they like. So why this is a big thing in the public imagination now is New Hampshire's election went insanely in favor of Bernie Sanders, but there are, I believe, 6 superdelegates from New Hampshire, 4 of which have already said that they will be voting for Clinton. So Bernie won 15 or 16 delegates, and Hillary Clinton won 9 delegates. But their superdelegates have already really closed the gap between them. And considering Bernie Sanders had a 20-point lead in the popular vote, that sounds a lot like it's the establishment, which I'm going to use the term because it's a big term in politics, but the establishment is going against the will of the people. And for nuance, let's give a pros and a cons on the superdelegates. The pros are superdelegates are politicians, and politicians making decisions about politics, which makes sense. You don't have, Joe the plumber sit in on a court-martial. No, you have generals and military police who know the job doing that and making decisions about the fate of the job. But on the other side, politicians are beholden to the public and should be of the people, for the people, and by the people. So when you have the establishment making a decision that goes so far against the public decision, it becomes an issue. And that's why there's a big debate right now among that. And yeah, that's my position on the superdelegates.
So the way I understand it, the Democratic Convention does give states normal delegates, correct? So they do have normal delegates who have to vote the way their constituents are voting.
Correct.
But then they have superdelegates who are able to vote whichever way they want.
Correct.
That's not entirely a bad system, I would say, because
no, it's definitely not.
It gives the people a say in who they vote for, which they definitely should. But it also lets politicians decide, like you said, it lets politicians decide matters of politics, which I've always thought was rational. And
yeah, it's kind of like, I believe they actually modeled it on the system, the two-house system we have in we have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. The House of Representatives has a certain number of representatives based on the state's population, but the Senate always has two senators from each state, and that's in order so that the big states don't have a bigger say than the small states.
Right. So I think that makes sense, but the last time I checked, I did see that most of the superdelegates had pledged to vote Hillary, which is kind of a shame because I know, like you said, there's a big populist movement towards Bernie Sanders. So it's kind of a shame to see that, but I honestly think that system would work better than just the straight populist voting of the Republican side.
Yeah, and it's definitely suffice to say that I might be singing a giantly different song if the RNC also had a superdelegate system, and they were, putting Jeb Bush and John Kasich, or one of the more rational or moderate conservatives, up. I just don't like it because it's against the will of the people, and which I think is stupid right now. But I wouldn't think it so much if the will of the people was to vote Trump in.
That's true. Yeah. So, well, that's interesting. I didn't know about that. So, way to go, Democratic Convention. You're actually doing exactly what I would have done if I had set this whole thing up. So, proud of you guys. Now, I know we don't have too much time here, but I did want to briefly touch on the Electoral College and get what your thoughts were on it.
The Electoral College, as far as I understand, was set up way back when, in the 1700s, which is way back when. It's, I think, a byproduct of the old quasi-aristocratic, just right out of the Enlightenment society that we had, because we were the first major democracy on Earth, and we didn't know how the hell to run this. We were young and naive and trying to figure it out along the way. So we set up this system of the Electoral College, and we've seen it in recent years, kind of like superdelegates, go against the will of the people in air quotes, in large air quotes, when Gore lost the election to Bush. Because Florida was predominantly voting for Gore, but the Electoral College went in favor of Bush. And then on top of that, there's also a voting machine scandal in there that I won't touch on. But the Electoral College, it's ingrained in our society. It would be difficult to get rid of. And I can't offer quite as big of a nuanced view as I can on this, because I don't know the extreme specifics of it. But for all intents and purposes, I'm pretty much in favor of it, simply because it's a system of organization that we utilize pretty efficiently.
Yeah, the idea put behind it was that the people, the common people of the nation,
the plebeians, if you will.
Yes, the plebeians, because the founding fathers were indeed obsessed with the Roman Empire. They don't know enough about politics to make a decision upon it, and they, as I believe Hamilton said in one of the Federalist Papers, they want foreknowledge. They don't know what they should to vote. So this mechanism was put in place of the Electoral College, which was a bunch of nominated people to elect the president. And I don't know the history behind all of this. I don't know how the things changed to where the president is essentially directly elected by the people. I don't know much about that, but
it hasn't changed in our system. The popular vote nowadays, essentially, you're voting for an electorate in the Electoral College, essentially your vote doesn't go towards the person. It goes towards a member of the Electoral College. And you have to tell the member of the Electoral College to vote a certain way, which in most states still applies. Like the member of the Electoral College has to vote the way the population vote, but there are a few states that still haven't switched over that system, so the Electoral College member has the discretion.
Okay, that makes sense. But I know a lot of people are not in favor of this electoral college because it's something that comes in between the people and their public officials, which I can understand. But
yes, the term gerrymandering is used a lot when talking about it.
Yeah. But I honestly would be very in favor of this concept of the electoral college, not in the way that it is today, but in the way that it should. The concept of having a certain college, a group of politically educated people voting for a president, that makes a lot of sense to me because, especially in our day and age, there's so much rhetoric flying and there's so much that the media just pumps through people's brains that it's hard for average, everyday, hardworking Americans who have jobs to go to and children to feed and raise and, car insurance to pay and houses to buy. Do we really need this giant election heaped on top of our backs to make an educated decision upon? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It honestly makes more sense to have someone whose job is to research people and see what they have said and go back through their records and see how they have voted. That enormous endeavor, give it to these people who that's their job, and then they vote on whoever they want. And another point against the Electoral College that I agree with is, I'll pose this question to you, Swallow, as a late sophomore in college. Do you think that your vote should be equal with a 18-year-old high school dropout?
Personally, I think yes, but I see the argument against that.
Because I know a lot of people would say, no, it shouldn't. If a person is educated and has gone through this rigorous responsibility of college, they might have a better idea of how government should be run than the 18-year-old high school dropout who doesn't care at all, who decides to vote one day, which, honestly, the only people who vote are people who care about politics. But I think that's a good point, is that are all votes equal, which in some cases I would say, whether or not you're educated, you're still a human being and should have a say in the way your government is run. But whether or not you have any idea of who the president should be, that's kind of a larger claim to make.
Yeah. To play devil's advocate, however, on this topic, the argument that I've heard against the Electoral College is that it's, well, let's put it this way. The quote, every American's every American's second job should be politics, really applies. And I think it's a remnant of a time when our voting rights really weren't allowed still. Women still didn't have the right to vote. Forget any minorities. Black people weren't people. And you also still had to be a landowning white male to vote. And I think now we have expanded that so much that we have moved kind of towards the enlightened ideal of believing that everybody educates themselves in their own way, and that each vote counts the same because they're all educated the same, in air quotes, in meaning that if you're the same age, you've gone through the same amount of experience and the same amount of life. that everyone else has. And that's kind of the argument against the Electoral College, is that it's kind of this remnant of an old patriarchal system. But I definitely see where you come from as well.
So let me ask you this. If we eliminate the patriarchal system to it, if we make it much more the way of the House of Representatives and we say, this district, you guys elect your elector, and that elector will then elect the president, and you have races for who gets this nomination, and then say that person has a secure job for the next 2 or 3 elections, so a fairly lengthy time in office, but I think that would probably give people enough protection if they wanted to vote against their constituents, because they would have a better idea of how the political game was working then, so they had a better idea of who should be the president. So say, make it an elected position, so now you have not just white landowning males, you have minorities and whites and all sorts of people who weren't even people back in the day in this position now. So it's much more like the House of Representatives. Would you be more comfortable with it then?
In a perfect society, that is definitely something that would happen, and that's definitely the idea behind the Electoral College. But you have to look at the representation. We have not as many women as men in the House of Representatives, because ideally we would have 50 women 50, and 50 right. men, and that's definitely not the case. Minorities are also super underrepresented in political jobs. So changing it to that system, where it's just another political position, really kind of, instead of taking away from the patriarchal system, it would, unfortunately, I think, add to the patriarchal system of it, which is a shame, because that's not how it should work, because politics should be fair and nice and happy.
Like me. Happy.
Yes.
But it would be an improvement on the situation as it stands now, because as it stands now, to my understanding, the Electoral College is made up of people who are nominated, and they basically don't have any real credentials. They're just whoever, I don't know who, but whoever someone decides to make a nominee, and they just kind of get the job, and no one knows who they are. I mean, I challenge every single one of you 3 people who are listening to this. You tell me right now who is one elector in the electoral college in this nation. Tell me one.
Don't use Google.
Yeah, don't use Google. Right off the top of your head, tell me one. Exactly. You don't know, because we do not know these people. So it would be an improvement on the system as it stands.
I can see that. Possibly.
And honestly, the way that I've always seen it is that your government is going to be a reflection of society, and so if you have racism in your society, you're going to have racism in your government, and as society changes, then your government will change, and they can play off of each other. So, yeah, the system would be sexist and racist, but well, the nation's sexist and racist, so you can't do better than the people.
That's really something hard for me to admit, but Trump is the Republican frontrunner, so I concur.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of a whole nother can of worms. But the way I see it, if it was an elected position by the people, then 1, they would have accountability, and 2, people would know who they were voting for, and this position would actually be something as opposed to kind of just a honorary position. So either way, I think from both sides of the aisle, we need to really change this electoral college. I guess that's what this whole hour and 40 minutes has been telling us.
Yeah. Politics sucks, man.
It kind of does, but Madison wanted it that way.
That's true. We're talking about James Madison, of course.
Yes,
Madison, Wisconsin.
Right. I couldn't think of any famous Madisons other than James Madison.
No, yeah. Either can I now.
Yep, I got nothing.
And on that note.
On that note, I think it's been a lovely chat with you Swallow. Do you have anything you'd like to leave the 3 listeners with?
You 3 keep on keeping on, and make sure to form your own opinions in this election year. It's a dangerous world out there. Don't just let someone else tell you what to do.
We haven't even talked about the possible 4-way election that could possibly happen.
Right. Happy is kind of alluding to the fact that Trump, in the beginning of his campaign, never said that he wouldn't run as an independent if he didn't get the nomination, and Bernie Sanders has a long history of running as an independent, so he's alluding to very possibly, and I don't think this is a very probable chance, but it is a chance of having Cruz or Rubio be the Republican nomination, and Hillary Clinton be the Democratic nomination, and Trump being the Bull Moose nomination, and Sanders being the Bullfrog nomination or something.
Well, we'll leave you with that. Just ponder that, and I'm not even going to touch on Bloomberg either. So on that note, I think we will. It's been a nice chat. So I think we will leave the people with that. Any final words there, buddy?
This is goodbye from Codename Swallow. Next week, you'll have That Owl Guy back, and you can listen to his much more melodious voice.
Should have you on nothing. Don't dwell. Alright, goodbye. Once again, Happy Hamster here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can leave a like down on YouTube. If you'd like more, we come out with new episodes every Wednesday. The music you heard in the intro was the song The Last Ones by the band Jazar. The song you're listening to now is called Slow Burn by Kevin MacLeod. If you really enjoyed this, you can head on over to our Facebook page and subscribe to that. You can also subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, which is where we primarily put out our videos. If you really missed That Owl Guy, you can head over to his blog, his very own blog, at owlguy.wordpress.com. If you really, really enjoy him, you can follow him on Twitter, at ThatOwlGuy at Twitter. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any comments, go ahead and leave them. If you just enjoyed it, leave a like, and we will see you next week.